Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the first Linux user group of what is this? August? Good Lord. Year's almost over. So we're gonna talk about Linux Mobile at least to start with today. We may move on to the second place topic if this one fizzles out, but I have some questions for everybody, so we'll start off with our discussion. So if you want to join, the link is in the video description. Actually, you wanna? I know, Drew. I know the reason why nobody joined. I didn't toot it out or announce it on the on the Discord. I did a good job. I was very prepared. It's okay. Anyway, so welcome. So we're going to talk about Linux Mobile. So I have first off, uh, anybody here actually used Linux on a mobile phone before? Nobody? Okay, so I might be the only. That's good because I'm the only one then. So I do actually have a Linux phone here. Um, it is horrible. It's like very bad. RBM, go ahead.
Okay, so I haven't technically used Linux as my mobile operating system, but on numerous occasions I haven't done it in a couple of years recently, but um, several years ago, wow, I can't put my timeline together because I was in a whole other state during the time. Anyway, it's more than a decade ago. I definitely ran like Arch Linux inside my phone and stuff. And like I would use it as a productivity tool so that
Mm.
I would have Linux available to me inside my phone. And it wasn't like SSH to a real computer or something either. It was full on Arch Linux, like CH root inside my Android system. And I don't remember the details of it, but if phones were better at the time, it would have been a pretty pleasant experience, mostly because you had the normal Android system on top of it that you could just use normally and be familiar and comfortable with as a phone interface. And then when you needed to do power user stuff, Linux was just an app on the phone pretty much, which was pretty cool.
I imagine if the folding phones weren't so like expensive, that'd make a perfect kind of device to have like what you're talking about. Like you could just open up Linux and have a full screen thing in like a tablet mode if you needed to. Um,
Yeah, I think it would be really cool if you had just regular Android on that outer display, and then yeah, like is that what you're saying? Then you
yeah,
flip it open into
flipping
tablet
open.
mode, and it's just like a Wayland native mobile Linux experience. That could be very cool.
Just imagine having Tmux there and having all your panes and stuff. That'd pretty sweet. Unfortunately, those things cost $2,000, the minimum. Nobody can afford them. Or if you're like Tyler, you leave it on the top of your car and get dismantled. Anyway, so I guess the question then, if what would it, for the rest of you guys, what would it take, or would you use Linux Mobile if it was something that was available to you? So, and if so, what would it take to get you to switch? For me personally, and I'll just kind of start us off here, it's all about the applications. Like there are certain apps on the phone that I just absolutely need. Like my banking application has to be there. I have to be able to, um, like my note taking application preferably is there. Probably Proton Mail, Proton Pass, things like that. And yes, most of that stuff is going to be on, like Proton Pass is probably going to be there. I don't know how well that would work on mobile because I don't know if the app is responsive or not. But for me, it's all about the applications. If you asked me like 3 or 4 years ago, I would told you I would need some games, but I haven't really done much in the way of mobile gaming in quite a while, so that's not as big a deal as it used to be. So for me, it's all about the apps. RBM, go ahead.
Oh man, so to get me to switch would be practically nothing. I'm already a hyper autist like Linux nerd as it is and prefer it over all other systems anyway. Though one day I do look forward to something that could be better than Linux, maybe a microkernel setup could be pretty interesting. But like just to switch over, it would take practically nothing because I also don't use my smartphone too much to do things. Like I'm not really addicted to staring at my phone much. I usually just text people with it. I just use it for sending text messages, maybe some phone calls, signal chats. Like it's mostly just text communication though. And then most of the stuff that I do on there already has a like a Linux or web app counterpart where when I'm at my computer, don't even have to pick up my phone most of the time because I could just do it straight from my workspace that I'm already using. So I would actually like to have Linux convergence the way that Ubuntu tried to do it way back in the day. It's like 2014 or maybe even earlier than that
Oh man, the
when they were
Ubuntu
trying to
phone.
do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Ubuntu phone and that convergence idea where you could have your phone was your PC. If you just plugged it in, it would orient as your desktop and the monitor, and you could use it with a mouse and keyboard, and you'd have the same user experience on your phone from your touch screen as you would from a mouse and keyboard on the same exact device. I think that would be my ideal scenario. But as far as apps and stuff go, I barely even use the phone for apps anyway. So I think I could replace all of that stuff with like a web app or a Linux native app. The only thing that I would have a problem with is mostly probably like user experience stuff, like integration and touch experience, and like click targets and stuff are extra small when they scale down to a phone screen. But in general, I think it take practically nothing to switch me over to Linux on the phone, and I'm looking forward to a day where I get an opportunity to do it.
Dennis?
First of all, the cost would have to come down in order for me to switch to it as my main thing. But actually in my house right now, the only way I can make things work phone wise the way they are is that I've actually got multiple phones that I use for different purposes. Just one main phone that has service on it. The rest of them connect kind of like tablets. They're just mini tablets. So if the price came down before I ever switched, I could easily see myself hooking it up as one of those secondary phones.
True?
I kind of feel like RBM and I are in the same kind of like boat. It's one of those things where I will go out of my way and leave my phone on a table downstairs, walk upstairs and use my PC to actually do a text, because that's how bad I am at actually using my phone. The truth of the matter is, every once in a while, I sent Matt like a screenshot of me using the terminal and connect like SSH into a server on my phone. That's like the extent of it. But I've tried. It's funny because one of the things because we've talked about this before, when PewDiePie kind of made his switch over, he also switched over to Graphene OS. And I looked into it and I thought to myself, man, I think I can do that. But then there's a few kind of like missing pieces. Like I need to have Google Maps. That's kind of and in order for you to, and yes, you can use it, but the problem is you're opening yourself up for some of the problems that you have even on Android as far as like, you know, privacy. So what's the point? Anyway, so yeah, I overall, I would love to have an alternative that would be really good, especially from a privacy perspective. But it's just not there yet, for me at least.
Agree. War Thunder, go ahead.
Yeah, hopefully it sounds okay. I'm on my headphones
Actually,
today.
you sound fantastic.
Oh, cool. My Bluetooth works correctly today. I can't say that every day.
It's like you're in the room with me, actually. Like what?
No, for me, it's app support. I actually do have my old S20 phone here that I've thought about putting a custom ROM on before, but custom ROMs and Android are kind of something I've never gotten into, and the longer I keep looking at the list of things to do is just like, holy crap, this is a little bit more I want to get into. And that's kind of the same way with the Linux phones. That's kind of my first issue with it. Is in the past it's been kind of difficult to even get to a Linux mobile operating system, let alone deal with all the other issues. The one thing that holds me back right now, and some of it's the crappy place I worked for, and I continue to work for at the moment, is app support. Right now, the only option they give me to two-factor into work is a smartphone app. A smartphone app that requires Google Play services.
Mm.
And that's a hard problem. I know some of the stuff like Ubuntu Touch you can do Waydroid and whatnot. And there probably are some workarounds for like a Graphene OS kind of situation, but it's kind of tough. I do and I don't use my phone. It's kind of interesting, but most of the time I use my phone, a Linux mobile operating system would handle it because I would open up a browser and go search for something I'm finding at a thrift store. Okay, what is this actually worth? Or is this something I'd be interested in? Other times it's responding to email. Those are things Linux has been able to do for 20 years. Surely a Linux mobile platform could do it too. So, but my main concern would be app support right now. And I'm just not as familiar with how far Linux Mobile has gotten. The last time I messed with it, probably dates me slightly, was when my Nexus 6 or 7 tablet supported Ubuntu Touch. And that was the last time I was really in the space.
Yeah, the Nexus 7 has been quite some time. I remember that thing. Like that actually had a really long lifespan for a Google product because a lot of people took it and hackintoshed it. It's not really the word I was looking for, but you know.
You could even install desktop Ubuntu on it, on the actual tablet itself. It ran terrible, but there was enough support to make it work.
And but that worked really well.
No, actually, I killed my first one, and then I bought a second one for $1 at a thrift store to try and make it happen again. And the same thing happened again, where the flash gave up.
Yeah, one day we should do a topic on Android tablets because the most disappointing thing in the world is an Android tablet. Like if they could have just copied what Apple did with the iPad, it would have been so much better. But there's just there's no there. You know what I mean?
I don't get it because that's what I use this phone as. Kind of like what Des was talking about for a second there. This is my old S20 phone. It doesn't have a SIM card in it anymore. I use it as a tablet. I film for my YouTube channel and I do some other stuff. I try to use it as a backup too for my two-factor stuff because, well, what happens when you drop your phone in the toilet and all your two-factors on it? You're up a creek. So, but
yeah, it's the tablet stuff is always disappointing. RBM, go ahead.
Okay, first of all, I just want to say if you have your two-factor tied to an app on exactly one device, please make sure you have your recovery codes and your backups made already and like 7 copies of those backups because yes, you can absolutely get locked out of everything that way and it's a disaster. Please make sure you have lots and lots of backups and recovery codes and all of that stuff set up for all of your accounts and everything because some of that stuff, once you lose access to it, you can't rebuild from it. But yeah, I think the general theme is kind of something that's true in always about switching to a new system. That people have already said the primary factors are cost and application support. And I think that's the same answer if you want to switch to Windows or Mac or iOS as well. Like if you're going to need app support, especially for your workplace, and it's going to need to be affordable, especially for your individual cases, for your personal cases. So like, I have the great luxury that I'm very grateful for that I get to be a remote worker and I get to do all of my work from a Linux computer and a Linux ecosystem. but not so many people have that luxury. And I think app support is probably going to be like the main kicker. If you don't have full app support for your workflow, then it's going to be hard to justify making a switch like that, which it's okay, I guess, but it can be tough.
War Thunder?
Yeah, I was going to say in response to RBM, you're absolutely correct. If you do two-factor, make sure you have that backed up 10 ways to Sunday like I do personally. However, the IT where I work are so stupid, and I don't know why. We are only allowed to have one device with two-factor, and we are not allowed to have the recovery codes, like at all. I can't download them out of the two-factor app. I can't do any forms of backup on that. Basically, if I get locked out of my account, I pick up the phone and I call IT and say, hey, I can't log in. And then they unlock my account through a text message or something like they did the first time. We found out about two-factor at this company by everyone's account getting locked out in the same day. So I personally would back everything up. In fact, I'm a little more paranoid than that. I use Bitwarden as my password manager still. I have dabbled with Proton Pass a little bit. There's still some things about it I need to figure out that I have problems with, and I'm not sure why, because Matt doesn't seem to have those issues. But I even export my Bitwarden vault to a KeyPass XE vault and save that on my NAS. That way, if worse comes to worse, and even at work, I do the same thing. I save it to a KeyPass on the OneDrive we have at work. That way, if worse comes to worse and Bitwarden just explodes one day, I still have passwords to all my accounts. So
I do basically the same thing. Only I have I use Proton Pass and I've backed it up to Bitwarden or Vault Warden, I suppose. For me, it's not really the topic, but I don't really care. The two-factor thing, for me personally, I'm not satisfied with the way I have it set right now because I use Proton as my two-factor authentication agent. I like it in that it comes in the browser. So when you go to a web page or whatever requires 2FA, it like pops up and gives you the code and you can log in. You don't have to go to your phone. Probably not the best actually security thing to do, but it works really, really well. The problem is that I also have 2FA for Proton itself. So I have to have Google Authenticator to get into Proton in order to do that. So I've been looking at alternatives to just the 2FA part because I like Proton Pass. But there's not really any good ones. So the one that I looked at most recently was called Ente, E-N-T-E, I think.
It's goofy.
Well,
It kind of works.
My biggest problem is that it doesn't have. What I want is a browser extension like Proton does. I don't want an application. Now, I don't, like an application on the phone. That's fine. That I could use that. But I want a browser extension, so it's just kind of built in. Again, maybe not the most secure thing, but it's a convenience kind of thing, and it would work. I think that'd be great, but I haven't found one that actually does it that way yet. Every one that I've looked at, they're all applications. Like they usually have Linux applications, and that's great. But I was still going to try out Ente to see how it would work, but I've been having I have some moral problems with Proton. Did you know that you can't actually export just the 2FA stuff? You have to export everything, including your passwords and stuff, in order to get to the 2FA stuff. And that's just, it's kind of walled garden-y for me. Like I want to be able to pull out just part of it,
I don't know if Bitwarden is the same way about that.
Maybe.
I've never used passkeys and stuff through them. But that's kind of one of the issues I have is because like on my phone right now, if I unlock it, I believe to do all the accounts that I have, I now have 3 authenticators on here for personal, and then I have another one for work that I have to use. I can't even use an alternative. I will warn you on the Adente, however the app is called. The first time I used it, I locked out half of my accounts, and I had issues backing up so the authenticator will let you back up those codes and whatnot, or even back up the app itself and the two-factor stuff. That sometimes just doesn't work. And I don't know why. And it's not just me; it's all over the Play Store and whatnot, where you'll back that stuff up, and then you'll go to put it back in with your password, and the app just says, "Sorry, that's not your password." I'm like, what are you talking about? I just put it there. I even wrote it down to make sure I did it right. And so there's some goofiness with it for sure. But you know, to that point, a lot of workplaces now that do remote work require these kind of crazy apps, and they don't want to provide you a work phone to separate those lives, which is how I'd prefer it. Because if my workplace wants to use a spyware device to do that, I mean, whatever, because it'll do what they need to do on their end, and then I can do me on my end. But
Yeah.
I wasn't given that choice.
So on the Linux mobile thing, I one of the things which we didn't really touch on yet was the hardware support, and I think that this is a big thing because if you want to install a flavor of Linux mobile, you know, whatever it is, you know, Manjaro mobile or Ubuntu mobile or whatever they are, you know, those are all very constrained in terms of what devices they actually work on. So from a user perspective, you may have to go out and find another device if you want to use that thing. From a developer perspective, it's a pain in the ass because as much problems as we've had on, you know, regular Linux at getting random Wi-Fi cards to work in laptops, there's still only a very small amount of Wi-Fi cards to actually cover, you know, in you know, relative terms. You know, maybe there's 100 or maybe there's 200, whatever it is. There are like an infinite amount of hardware combinations on mobile phones, right? You know, Samsung alone doesn't use the same framework throughout all of their devices, right? So you have to worry about different CPUs and GPUs and antennas and all this stuff. And that's just one brand. Then you have like 12 different, you know, Chinese brands, and you have Google, and you have all of these different, you know, brands. They're all doing different things within their own ecosystem and apart. So if you go to something like Graphene OS, they have a list of phones that they'll work on, and Samsung is on there, but only for like really old devices, you know. So you're never gonna get the new devices, and that's not their fault. That's Samsung being douchebags, you know. And the fact that they have to basically support these devices in such a hands-on fashion instead of just saying, hey, here's a Linux kernel with some stuff on top of it and it will work on the vast majority of stuff, like with Linux. Like, can you imagine if Arch Linux had to support every single SKU of an HP laptop in order for them all to work? It would never work. So I think that in addition to the app thing, which I completely agree on, and like I even said it, but I think hardware has to be the biggest thing preventing a lot of people from even considering it, because it just isn't going to work on their devices, and it's such a pain in the ass to actually develop for. Spreading it far and wide, I don't know, it's going to be really hard. War Thunder, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it on the head. And I think some of it's the way that ARM versus x86 works, because on like even for Linux on ARM devices, the whole device tree thing is like a disaster. Like you can't just support ARM, you have to also have like a drivers and whatnot for that device's device tree itself. If it tells you how stupid this is an S20FE, and if anybody knows what that means, it's the fact that I have previously looked at either putting a Linux on here or a flavor of Android, like a Lineage OS or something like that. And because this is an FE, the hardware in here will not work at all with anything S20 related. It has to be an S20 FE device image or it doesn't work. And it just gets dumber than that. If you own a Samsung device, one of the reasons why I think a lot of the mobile distros and Android forks don't touch them is an S24 is not an S24 necessarily. There's the Exynos processor version, there's the normal Qualcomm processor version, and those have different hardware SKUs inside. Some of them use different broadband adapters, and it's a mess.
Well, and it can differ between like storage options. Like each,
Yep.
like if you have 256 and a 1 terabyte, they have different They have different model numbers, and because it's all tied together. And Samsung specifically does something stupid, where is if you do manage to figure out how to get something on there, they turn off hardware features like cameras and stuff like that, where you just can't use it. And now I think that they've gotten around some of that on some of the older devices, but on the newer ones, they just haven't been able to get past it. And that's, I mean, that's horrendously, it's horrendous on a moral standpoint, I think, from a lot of these companies, but it's not surprising, so it's
it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
And the other part of it that nobody talks about, and I won't get into it so someone else can talk for a while, but bootloaders. With Samsung's One UI 8 update, which my S24 here has, bootloader's locked. You cannot unlock the bootloader. You cannot flash the phone. So it's effectively an appliance. You can't touch it. They won't let you unlock it anymore. This S20 is old enough. It's stuck on One UI 7. I can still unlock this bootloader and flash it with Lineage OS. And I didn't know about that until several months after I got the god-awful One UI 8 update.
Yeah, it's not very good. Des, go ahead.
Okay, this is a little bit off topic, but it's sort of on the topic of hardware in general and compatibility with Linux. So, forgive me for being a little ignorant on why this isn't already done, but why can't some big player currently in the Linux community, like Red Hat or Ubuntu or someone like that, someone corporate based, why can't they, for every hardware they want it to work on, whether it's mobile or PC or even Mac, why can't they go around to all the companies producing the hardware and say something little, but $10 or whatever here, something like that. I will give you this money if you will develop for me some drivers for your hardware. If you will develop them yourself, and go from there, and still let distros choose about whether they include them or not, but don't care whether they make them proprietary or whether they make them open source, just so that they'll have an incentive to make some driver. And then after they've made the drivers, we of course still work on open source drivers so that it works there too, which are not affiliated with it. But then you'd at least have some driver for just about all the hardware.
I have a feeling that most of it comes down to money and interest in doing so. Like, say for example, Canonical decided they wanted to approach Samsung. Samsung would first have to have the interest in doing it, and they probably don't, because why would they? What benefit to them would they have other than a one-time payment of $10? They just would have no reason to do so. They'd have to have some kind of ongoing monetary interest in actually doing that. It's the same reason why Nvidia for years looked at the Linux drivers and said, not our problem. You know, we'll do it, but only because Intel's gonna make us, you know, and we're gonna do a half-ass job. And it wasn't even really until Linux started taking over in the server space, and they started looking at AI, and they needed to have actual support there, that they started taking the Linux drivers on NVIDIA, you know, seriously. It's the same thing here. They have to have a monetary reason to do it. Noob Forever, go ahead. No, we can't hear you.
Is this better? Can you hear me now?
Oh, we can, but it sounds like you're about 12 miles away from your microphone.
How about now?
Uh, a little better?
I will jank up it a
Oh,
bit.
there you go.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's more feasible that like a single startup or a smaller company will come up with a Linux phone with a specific distro on it or custom made, than that it will come from the bigger parts. As you said, the financial incentive is just different. So I think it's more like you see with Graphene OS, that it's like a single effort with a single purpose distro, like privacy.
Yeah. It probably like maybe like Framework or something. Maybe eventually do something like that. Now, I mean, there have been attempts at that kind of thing before, but I don't know. We'll see. Drew, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, you kind of stole what I was about to say, because Framework, Tuxedo, System 76, hardware makers that are that have some type of standing in the Linux marketplace, that have built hardware. But I honestly, because of the investment that it would take for them to try to integrate mobile into their already, into their products, would mean most likely they'll have to partner with somebody. And let's just say they partner with Pine 64 or somebody like that. They could possibly do a little bit more in terms of share that kind of expenditure, so that they could maybe move into the space. But as far as graphene, I even have to back off of that one, because it's purely an Android project, really. And, and yes, it's interesting now that Android and Chrome OS are kind of merging their code base to make it more Android-like. But at the same time, with mobile, it would be really cool if someone like System 76, even though they're like hip deep and cosmic right now, would go toward something kind of like a meaningful project for the mobile community, for mobile.
I have a feeling that the margins, like, do you guys remember? It was like the Librem 5 or something. I think that's the name. It was like, at the time it was like $900 or $600. It was like an obscene amount of money. I don't even remember what the price was, but at the time it was a lot of money. Nowadays it would seem fairly normal, but the problem is, if you're going to sell a phone, you have to be able to make money on it, and because you're going to develop it, and if you're going to do your own like actual chassis, and you're going to have to source all the hardware and stuff for it, you're going to have to do all that stuff. And then you get to a point where, you're going to charge, let's say you charge $850. Like, if I had a choice between an $850 Linux phone and an $850, say, Pixel 9, I'm going to have to choose the Pixel 9 because it does more. Until it's a traditional chicken egg problem. You can't, Linux mobile isn't going to end up being there until the software is there, and the software is not going to be there until the hardware is available to actually develop for. Unlike on traditional desktop Linux, where there was an incentive to have it work on as much hardware as possible because of enterprise use and because of actual community interest in getting it to work, there's not a ton of interest in Linux mobile community-wise to actually get it there. There's some, but the momentum isn't as well, it's not as big as traditional Linux was, probably for a lot of the reasons that we've talked about so far. War Thunder, go ahead.
Somebody might slap me for it, but I kind of look at this in a similar situation to what Valve did with the Steam Deck. And we almost need a similar situation to like Valve bringing the Steam Deck to market and bringing Steam OS to the market in the Linux mobile space. If you think about it, some company that's willing to bring a device to market and an operating system. And the only way you get out of that chicken and the egg problem, like, Gaben wants everyone to build for Linux. Well, he brought Proton to the table. We almost kind of need something like that where you have your Linux mobile operating system and you can build Linux apps for that device, but you've got some kind of compatibility like a Waydroid or something baked in that's well tested to bring, either the Aurora Store or F-Droid or any number of those platforms to people, but you got to make it easy. The Steam Deck has experienced a lot of growth and a lot of, explosion and whatnot because it's easy. People almost don't even know it's Linux. You pick it up, you install a game, you play it, and most of the time you don't even think about it. You kind of need that kind of experience with a Linux mobile phone to start introducing it to the average person. Otherwise, you're talking about a very niche market of Linux enthusiasts who want to plug their phone into their monitor and SSH into their server and things like that,
Yeah. All right. So this phone right here is running Linux Mobile, and what you're seeing on it's kind of very blurry, but this is actually F-Droid on Linux Mobile. It does work. This phone is from Furry Labs. They sent this to me. I was supposed to do a review of it, but I couldn't bring myself to do it because I would have been an asshole about it because it's not a very good it's not a very good experience. It's not really the hardware's problem, although the battery life is atrocious. It's like so obnoxious. So just side note on this whole thing. Everybody knows that if you have a laptop on Linux, that the battery life oftentimes is bad because it doesn't actually go to sleep when you shut the lid, So a lot of times it's just sitting there draining the battery away merrily, like it's running full hog. And does the exact same thing on Linux Mobile. When you put that screen to bed, it's not actually turning things off. It's still running in the background, as far as I can tell. And it just means that the battery on this life like lasts like 2 hours, and that's like not using it at all. It's like it's not very good. But to your point, War Thunder, this does have full-on Waydroid on it. You can install any app that's available to any, not Waydroid, but F-Droid, and it works fairly well. The biggest problem I had with this was that there for a little while I couldn't get the mobile keyboard to come up on some of the apps because it was expecting like a hardware keyboard, but they fixed that in an update. It's actually very good. Now this is running GNOME Mobile, and it looks okay. Like I just actually opened something up, but getting this thing centered is actually quite hard to be honest with you. Now I'm in a little box, but the software. I will say this: GNOME Mobile is miles and away better than Plasma Mobile. Plasma Mobile is just atrociously buggy. This wasn't that bad. If the battery life wasn't horrible on this, I probably could actually use it. Except I live in the United States and we have eschewed SIM cards. So if you want, I had to switch to a different phone company to test this as an actual mobile phone because my phone company doesn't offer SIM cards anymore. It's like a cable company that doesn't offer cable anymore. Like it, and that's an actual thing. So I think when it comes to the actual hardware stuff, it's really it's like. There has to be that incentive there, but it also is more like, how are you going to do it, and why are you going to do it, and it can, even if you can see a market there, is there actually a market for a third platform? Because I mean, everyone just goes out and buys either you have the money to do so and you buy, you know, the latest Galaxy or the latest iPhone or whatever, and that's what you do, or you don't have that kind of money and you don't really see the value in spending $1,200 on a phone, and you go buy a you know, a $300 Android phone or a nothing phone or whatever it is, right? That's what everybody does. You go to your carrier, you buy a phone. If you know better, you get online, maybe you buy a phone, but you still have a set thing, and you have an idea of what you're going to get when you get there. If you go into a carrier and all of a sudden there's this third option and nobody really knows what it is, you know, is it going to have all the things that I need to have in order to use it? How am I going to learn how to do those things? How are they going to sell it? Do they have the reason to sell it? Because if it's just System 76, if they're just selling that on their website or whatever, that's limiting them to just Linux nerds, you know, because the only people who buy from System 76 are people who know about Linux and want to use Linux. You know, someone. I mean, because System 76 doesn't have a store that someone can just wander in and say, "Oh, that's a nice looking computer. I'm going to buy it." You know. Now, I mean, maybe they can solve that with marketing or whatever, but I don't know. Expanding, you know, into the more mass market, which for a phone you kind of have to do, you know, in order to make, you know, your money back. I think it's an almost impossible task for a small manufacturer to do. Now, if, say, for whatever reason, Samsung got pissed off at Google, and they actually did this for a little while on their mobile watches. They developed Tarzan. I think it was called Tarzan, something like that. Anyways, that was Linux based. I'm pretty sure it was Linux based. And now, granted, they didn't stick with it. Eventually, Google and them made up, and they ended up back on Wear OS. But it was a thing. So if a big manufacturer like that eventually decided, like, you know, regular Android is just not going to do it, maybe we go to AOSP or whatever, you know, maybe that's an opportunity, but it's, you know, something's going to have to happen. War Thunder, go ahead.
Yeah, and actually, real quick, excuse me, I think it was Tizen OS, if I'm not mistaken.
That's it.
And I know they put it on more than just
Tarzan,
their watches.
you know?
Yeah. I think it was even on some refrigerators. I could be mistaken, but they had it in like a handful of different places and whatnot, and it kind of scared Google. But to your point earlier about, is there room for a third mobile OS? Well, we watched Microsoft try. This is a Nokia Lumen.
Okay,
I think this is a
can we just pause for just a second? How many phones do you have just sitting around there for you just to crap? I mean, it's
these days not much. I have an old iPhone 6 that I think is dead. That was my old iPhone that I had for a while.
I have to interject here because he's actually showing the same phone 6 times in a row. It's one phone. He's just saying, "Oh, check it." No, it's the same phone.
The same one.
Yeah, I need to interject too, man. Are you about to? You got so many phones. Are you about to start mounting these on your ceiling like Nate did his monitors?
I could try. Well, and okay, so the short story on this one is way before we had smartphones and whatnot. I just had a dumb flip phone. My father saw these at a Walmart, and I think we paid like $75. This was a prepaid smartphone, but it runs Windows Mobile. Originally, I had Windows 8 Mobile, and then later on it changed and whatnot. And it was kind of one of those things where, you know, we watched Microsoft try and take the Android market with these things. And I got to be honest, other than the crap app selection, these were actually pretty decent phones. Not this one specifically. It was kind of underpowered, but like the experience using it on mobile and just doing basic things with it was actually not that bad. It was kind of a shame that they killed it off when they did, but there was just no apps for it. Like I got a weather app, Skype, and like one other thing. Like they didn't have games, they barely had Spotify, they barely had a lot of things on here.
Yeah, if Microsoft had been smart, they would have thrown as much money as they could have possibly had at every developer ever and say, "Hey, make this thing work." But they just, for whatever reason, didn't do it. Instead, they bought Nokia. You know, they bought Nokia like that was going to solve everything. You know, Drew, technically you were first. Go ahead.
Sorry. Imagine, like, I can't believe I'm about to say this. Okay, but let's just say there is a Linux mobile OS that allowed for kind of containerization, like a flat pack, and you would have the flat pack in it would be an Android container, so that your bank app, Matt, would work. You know what I mean? That would be an interesting kind of like fix. You know, you'd have this OS but you'd have Android containers.
I think that would be great. I don't. It, I don't know what the package situation is on this thing, because I do believe it actually does install when you go to the regular store, not the F-Droid. It does install flat packs, but yeah, we've talked about flat packs and their myriads of problems before, so I don't know. It'd be an interesting proposition. I thought, Drew, when you say that, what you were going to say as well, can you imagine Nix OS on a phone?
I would never say that.
It would be Debian on a phone, let's be real.
Yeah, well,
why not?
You could put it on an old phone. It'd be great. Dennis, go ahead.
So, I've got a bunch of phones, like I said, too. They're just pretty much hung up nicely instead of right next to me. And I'm actually four phones short of where I really need to be now. So I'm going to have to wait till I can replace them.
Okay. I'm at the point now where I never want to buy another phone. Like, I'm going to drive this Galaxy S25, which I spent entirely too much money on, into the ground for 10 years, if I possibly can. I had the same plan with my iPhone, but I dropped it and broke the screen. But I've gotten a little smarter. I've put the screen protector on there, and it's going to last me forever, as long as it possibly can. Because I am at the point now where I refuse to spend $1,000 on a phone again. Like, I'm not doing. I did it once. Actually, I've technically done it twice now. I never want to do it again. And I should have bought used this time. I didn't, but that's more of a me problem. One thing I will say though, Android does a fairly good job of covering the low end, right? It does, you can go get an Android phone for like $200. The problem is, theoretically, being able to go buy a Linux phone for like $200 and it be a good experience, that would be if they could find a way to compete with those low-end Android phones, it would be a good thing. The problem is, like, first off, no Linux manufacturer has been able to do that yet. Like, every one that I've seen is minimum $500 and is usually quite a bit more. And phones iterate fast. So there's a new iPhone every year. There's a new Galaxy every year. All of these things come out every year because they have a new hardware or whatever. The Pine phone hasn't been updated in like 5 or 6 years, maybe even longer than that. And it was slow when it came out. At this point, I'm actually questioning whether or not Pine 64 is actually still in business, because I haven't seen them do shit in like years. So not sure what's going on there. I mean, granted, I don't know that their business model was all that great. Selling a laptop for $200, selling a phone for that, and a watch for like $25 or whatever it was. Like, I don't know. I mean, your margins can't have been all that big in the long run anyways, but they were gone. The Librem guys, I haven't seen anything from them in ages. So even the hardware vendors that were out there saying, what, let's try this thing, have kind of gone by the wayside. And when it's mobile that moves so fast, it's hard to see anyone be able to keep up with that. So that's the reason why I bring up my next point. Do you guys think that instead of, because we've talked about duplication of effort and all the distros that we have and all the choices and stuff like that, if that ends up being the situation on mobile, it's never going to succeed. And basically that's where we're at right now. Like, you can go, there's 4 different distros you can choose from. There's 3 or 4 different desktop environments or whatever. Everybody's doing their own thing. Do you guys think that it would not be just better to fork AOSP and start from there? Like, yeah, technically it has a lot of influence from Google or whatever there, but if you fork it, you could theoretically start going in a different direction. And it is open source. You could pull all the Google stuff out of it if you wanted to, but you're starting with a mobile base. And yes, it's an old Linux kernel, whatever, who cares? Who actually cares that you know what Linux currently have? But the thing about AOSP is that they've done so much work to that kernel to get it to work on more devices. It seems like that would be a better place to start off with, and that's the reason why some of the ROMs do actually start off with AOSP, because it gives them more of a hardware base than if they just started off with regular Linux, because none of those actually support, you know, most of the hardware there. So at least for me personally, I think the AOSP would be a good place to start off with, even if it requires a forking effort and all this stuff. It just doesn't seem to be like anything anybody's really interested in doing. War Thunder, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that's important to talk about, because as much as I like my Debian, as much as I like the slower LTS model and whatnot, for the phone mobile market, I think that would be tough without some amount of, how's the best way to put it? You'd have to have a lot of hardware, the equivalent to like hardware enablement, constantly pulling into something like that, because the mobile phone space changes so fast. You know, a phone that's 3 or 4 years old these days is obsolete. It moves that quickly, and some of it's not even just software related, it's hardware related, you know. Like you joke, but I've got another phone over here that was one of my early phones when I first got a smartphone, and like 2 years it was junk. You know, I didn't pay much for it, but you know, 2 years it's junk. You know, this Galaxy S24 that I complain about, it overheats when I use the camera. It's not even 2 years old, and it's already to the point where I'm getting ready to trade it in on something else because half the time it's unreliable. So, I mean, it's tough. And then you try to lump Linux into that, where the Linux mobile space is already struggling for ground, and you can't run a 5-year-old chipset and expect it to, you know, woo the masses or whatnot. They want better performance than that.
Well, I mean, at least in theory, you could, because Linux would have a benefit where they're not going to be tied to, or at least in theory, they won't be tied to financial interests in planned obsolescence. I think that's what the word I was looking for, right? So like Samsung and all the rest of them had to literally be forced at gunpoint by Google to offer like 3 years of updates. You know what I mean? And it took them almost 20 years to finally agree to do that. Like, you remember back in the day on an Android phone, if you got one Android update, you were phenomenally lucky. And usually by the time you got it, the next version of Android was already out. You know what I mean? It's gotten a lot better because Google, like I said, literally had to force them to do so. And Google forced, they pulled so much stuff out of Android and put it in Google Play services so they could update that stuff, because the carriers and the manufacturers weren't doing it. So all these phones are out there like running Ice Cream Sandwich, and it was like 10 years after Ice Cream Sandwich was released, and you know, they couldn't update any of that stuff. So Linux would theoretically have an advantage in that they wouldn't have to deal with any of that stuff. It'd be very much kind of like Apple does. Like, Apple doesn't do anything with the carriers as far as I know in terms of updates. Like, when the update for iOS 26 comes out and you have an iPhone, you're going to get it. You don't have to wait for AT&T to approve it because they want to put all their garbage on it. So Linux would be kind of like that. When an update comes down, you could just get into the terminal and do sudo apt upgrade, you know, and it would just pull out down all the stuff. So at least in theory, you know, that could be an advantage. But how much people, and that would then, because I mean, Linux is traditionally pretty good at extending hardware life, at least in theory. You know, you'd get some of the same benefits of being able to work on older hardware, because eventually, if people put enough work into it, I mean, a lot of work has gone into the kernel to support all of this stuff over 30 years. You know, if eventually Linux Mobile were able to do that, where it had a wide breadth of support for older and newer hardware, but we keep coming back to, there has to be somebody who says this is actually worth doing, and even those who have said it's worth doing have fallen by the wayside. You know, and just have kind of stopped doing it. Now, I know there's software developers still working on it, but even then, you know, they're not news very often. So what are they actually doing? Specs, go ahead. Oh, wait, hold on a second. I'm sorry. Nerdgasm, you were first.
Gosh, I know I was late, but come on. Okay, so I think one advantage we really have in the current day is that mid-range chipsets are just so much more capable than they used to be. And the problem with a lot of low end and mid range phones is not the power of the main chipset itself. It's that they tend to use really low quality storage on board, and that storage is slow to begin with, and then that storage is what degrades the most over time. That's why a lot of phones and tablets, even running a custom ROM, doing basic things, run like crap after 3, 4, 5 years. It's not that the chipset is degraded; the chipset's still fine. It's the storage. So if you compare, if you pair a mid-range chipset with some high-end storage like that, you could potentially have a phone that runs well enough for good 5, 6, 7 years, no problem. So we're at a point where if we can just get the software there, then we can have something that would actually be usable for a long period. Is that marketable still? That's definitely still going to be the problem, and getting the price points right to be marketable. That's just definitely the long term problem. But like I've definitely been ready for it for forever. Like even before I was actually really into Linux, back in 2013, I was one of the crowdfunders for the Ubuntu Edge, and I was like all in. I spent like I think it was half a month of pay at the time just to get in on that crowdsource project, and I was devastated when it got canceled and refunded. I was planning on having that be my phone for the next like 7 years or something like that, and I'm pretty sure I would have been able to, because at that time that was an overbuilt phone compared to everything else, compared to the Nexus 4 I was using at the time.
The days when Canonical actually cared about the Linux desktop. Those were the days. Specs, go ahead.
So I am not sure whether this point was covered earlier since I joined late, but I would also say there's inherently also a security risk with Linux on mobile. Because I think it's known by now that the Linux desktop is nowhere near as secure as something like iOS or Android. So I would say for something like a phone, especially where you carry around all the time with you, I would say the security of Linux overall would need to be improved significantly.
Hey, for a lot of things, I think I'm gonna have to agree with you, simply because it's gonna be the same thing like we're going through with gaming right now with the anti-cheat stuff. Because if you a lot of times, like if, for example, if you root your Android device, your banking application won't work. And I think on Linux, a lot of times the banking app would actually see your Linux device as something that is rooted, because you have root access and you have the ability to get around safeguards and stuff because you have all this access, right? So, because it doesn't have a lockdown kernel and all this stuff, similar to what Android does, I think that'd be a big thing. Now, I don't see. Maybe you know what? Maybe Drew had a point earlier when he was talking about containers. I know he was kind of joking, but if we had a better container technology that was actually containerized instead of just pretend containerized like Flatpak is, I think that could be the solution. But again, it would have to develop a lot of trust for a lot of people in order for it to actually be considered good and secure. And even then, like my bank is a big bank. Like it's one of the biggest in the world. I would be like astonished actually if even if like Linux Mobile became like a big thing that they ever supported it. I mean, it's just because they have the incentive to keep their thing as tied down and secure as possible. And Android's basically backed by the full faith and credit of Google in this case, and Linux is never going to have that backing. Even if the phone and operating system come from something like Canonical or Red Hat, they don't have the same pull as Google does. So, whatever. Nerdgasm, go ahead.
See, on security, there's going to be two different parts to it. There's the software side and the firmware side. On the software side, like normal desktop Linux for the most part does not have quite as many security measures. It's more so that its obscurity and fast moving kernel keeps it more protected from a lot of things. But we can definitely see that like Linux absolutely can be secure. Like there's a lot of basic things from the desktop side. Like you can do immutable. You can do a few different layers and stuff like that. You can do some basic containerization. But if we look at the server side, that's where we see a lot more of the security measures being put in place. And like we can definitely mix and match a few things and actually get the software side to be decently secure. The problem with like the auto or the anti-cheats in video games and stuff is that they're just not building them to be compatible in Linux. It's not that those things couldn't be compatible or they couldn't do something to their satisfaction. They're just choosing not to because the market is so much smaller for them. Then there's the firmware side, which for the longest time was one of the biggest problems because you'd have Qualcomm, Broadcom, those sorts of companies that make the chips. They would stop supporting those individual chips. They would stop releasing driver and firmware blobs for those chips pretty quickly, or sometimes even before their support windows were officially over. And that's what would hold back a lot of the phone makers from actually releasing various Android updates, is because they needed updated stuff from Broadcom and stuff like that a lot of times. Well, now that Google has actually bullied them into supporting things for longer, plus there's just market forces that have caused them to consider supporting things for longer. That's why we're seeing the Google Pixel phones and the Samsung phones get 7 years of software updates. Is because they're actually the chip makers are actually supporting some of that stuff a little bit longer and giving more of the information over for those companies to do the work. So now that we're actually in that space, we can potentially also just take advantage of that and have updated firmware that's more secure for for our Linux phones too, potentially.
Well, I do think that if ARM laptops start taking off a little bit more in the Linux space, the development for the software aspect of that kind of stuff will take off a little bit more because, at least the architectures will at least be somewhat similar. Whereas now most of the development for Linux is on x86, and yeah, like Intel tried an x86 phone and then it set itself on fire, so they decided that wasn't a good idea. So, I maybe if ARM comes to Linux a little bit more than it has so far, maybe the development there, and then they can start working on the security and stuff that goes in, to go into that. But right now, it's kind of two separate things so far. Specs, go ahead.
I would also say something also interesting could possibly be RISC-V in the future. I heard that's in open architecture compared to ARM in terms of licensing. But regarding security, I would also say if you were to make desktop Linux more secure, you would definitely have to make some compromises, as particularly to your convenience. Like it'd be very inconvenient I'm not sure if you heard this, like use something like Secure Blue, which is like a security enhanced version of Linux. Um, it's it makes things very inconvenient overall. But regarding Android does security so well that it's basically transparent to the user. You can open up an app and it's going to be sandboxed. There's literally no user intervention. A user expects to download an app and to use it normally. If Linux phones were ever to hit mainstream, I would say that aspect would have to be significantly improved.
Yeah. Do you? All right. So let's play a game and ask this question because I had to ask this question. It was in the rules. If you were to choose the best Linux distro, even if it doesn't currently have a mobile version, what Linux distro would be best for in this future ideal we all have, where we've solved all the problems we just discussed magically, and Linux mobile development is high on the hog. Everybody's doing it. What distro do you think is going to be, or could be, the distro for Linux mobile going forward? Does anybody? Dennis, go ahead.
Either basically what I'm trying to create, or Linux Mint.
Linux Mint. Well, that put a grin on War Thunder's face. I was actually going to say Debian. It doesn't change very often. It's known to be stable. It's well developed. It's not based on something else, so it's not relying on anything else. It has a wide package manager. And it's known for being able to handle a repository of tons of applications very, very well. And they are known for being able to work in secure environments. Now, we should make sure to remind me. We should talk about the security a little bit more in a minute, because I have something to say about an alternative to Linux. But War Thunder, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say I wasn't going to say Linux Mint because they don't even support ARM, let alone Linux Mobile. So I don't think that's happening anytime soon. They've also got a lot on their plate with stripping Ubuntu and doing everything else. I don't know that they would, but I honestly was thinking more something like Fedora that's kind of more semi-rolling in its nature, where some things are static, but some things aren't. And given that we're talking the Linux mobile platform, typically Fedora has been fairly favorable to developers in the past, at least in their decisions and how they package things and whatnot. So I would think they would almost, in a way, develop images for stuff. I mean, even stuff like, and I could be wrong, I think there are things in the works for like ARM-based Kino Night, ARM-based Silverblue. Even I think it was George Castro was even talking about his distro eventually being on ARM, like Snapdragons at some point. So I could kind of see something like that, like a Universal Blue on phones being a thing. Other than battery life would be atrocious.
It would be bad. Yeah. You're right, though, that Linux Mint does not need an extra distro to actually give out. They have way too much going on. But I think that's one of the reasons why I said Debian, because Debian does put an awful lot of ISOs out there, but it's all just one thing with a few variations, right? Whereas, like even Ubuntu, well, technically, yeah, they're putting out just one distro. They also have a lot of stuff going on and stuff, and they've shown in the past they just can't, like, if you're gonna do this, you have to stick with it. You can't put something out there and put effort into it for a few years and then, oh, it didn't work, I'm sorry, we're going away. You know what I mean? Like because people, like, you have to be able to provide support for these things for long periods of time, and especially when you're selling to the Linux community, who's less interested in getting a new phone every year, probably, and you're wanting to, support people for 5, 10, 15 years, maybe on the same device. You have to be able to commit to that. And I don't know that anybody really has the thing to that. But if any distro did, I could see Debian actually being that distro. So relatedly, what do you guys think the best desktop environment would be for a phone? Now, I have tried both GNOME and KDE. Right at the moment, GNOME beats the pants off KDE. But in this idealized future, who do you think is going to win? Specs, go ahead.
One word, GNOME. That's it.
It's the same. It's the same future we're in on the desktop. Damn it. War Thunder, go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of agree. And I did test this for a while when I had a Microsoft Surface Go, and I actually put a Debian with like Phosh on it, And as far as a tablet experience, it wasn't actually that bad, and I assume the mobile experience would be fairly similar to that. I just think they've done a lot more to work better with touch, better with a mobile environment, and whatnot. They're also, I hate to say it, their interface in general with GNOME is a lot more what I would call mobile friendly in the way that it's laid out, the way the controls are set up. There's one system settings to go into, the drop downs for like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and whatnot look kind of like a mobile phone to me. So even moving into like their Phosh environment, I just think they do a much better, more polished job, even if I think they could use to have a few more features, but that's just how GNOME rolls.
Yeah, and the feature bloat that KDE has on desktop isn't suitable for mobile. It's absolutely not. You have to be able to trust your mobile phone not to crash. And I'm sorry, KDE guys, but Plasma still crashes every once in a while. Yeah, it's gotten way better, but every once in a while, KWin just decides, nope, I'm leaving here. You guys are gonna have to relaunch. And that can't happen on mobile. Like this thing has to be able to be available for emergency calls. It has to be available for, text messages and communication and stuff like that. It's something that people rely on. And if it's not 100% rock solid, it can't be caught because KWin decided it was going to close or whatever, or Dolphin crashed.
You imagine you just pull out the phone dialer to call 911 and it's just KWin has crashed unexpectedly instead.
Yeah, well, I didn't have the 911 thing happen, but when I was using the Pine phone that comes with, I think came with Manjaro with Plasma Mobile, KWin crashed all the time, and from little things like putting a widget on the desktop. You know what I mean? Like, okay, but I mean, it's a little unfair because it still feels like it's been early days. But I mean, you guys have been working on Linux Mobile for 20 years, and it still feels like, we're reiterating over and over again. Like, people realize that what we're doing is not working, so they'll start over again, and it's just over and over and over again. And, because of that, it always feels like it's perpetually beta, and it's just never, that can't be an experience that you have on a mobile phone when you have to be able to call 911 reliably if you have to. So, Nerdgasm, go ahead.
Gosh, okay. So I haven't actually touched Linux on a phone in probably like 6-7 years. And I really have been wanting to get my hands on a phone to run Linux so I can actually experience some of the current GNOME and KDE on it. But I'm definitely a KDE user. I like my KDE quite a bit. I would like to have KDE on mobile, but yeah, I definitely get that there's definitely still some stability problems there for for especially for mobile. But what I'm gonna have to really suggest is Cosmic. Let Cosmic be the one. Save us all.
The desktop environment that's never gonna come. Sorry, Nate.
I mean, except for it's actually pretty dang stable for being an alpha, but it is still an alpha, and who knows what will be out really.
You just made Nate very upset.
He'd definitely buy that. All right, so I guess the question, I have a list of questions here. I want to see which ones we haven't answered yet. So I asked, can you ever see Linux Mobile being good? We've kind of answered that. What is holding Linux back? We talked about that. What would it take to get you to switch? We talked about that. And all right, here's a good one. Because the idealized future of Linux Mobile actually being, a thing is probably never going to happen. Like a big thing. What do you think that Android itself could pull in from Linux to be appropriate for a lot more Linux users, like to feel better to use, in terms of Linux features that you could run? So is it being able to run Linux applications? So like Chrome OS is going into Android. Like theoretically you could run like native Linux applications there in the future. I don't know if that's something that Google would do or not, or what they're going to do with that, but it's possible. And I know you can already download applications that will allow you to run Linux stuff inside of them, but I'm talking like actually like installing, I don't know, like this sounds like a horrible idea, but installing GIMP on your Galaxy S24 War Thunder, that just sounds like a fantastic option for you, right? Or would you see like just being able to have access to a real browser or something like that? So are there features from actual Linux that you would see on Android that would make you feel better about using Android? Noob Forever, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, for me it would be the to customize it like the way I like it. But the main part for me for switching to Linux is to influence the level of privacy you have on your phone. So it's not the apps or features like that. It's more privacy driven.
Yeah, and I mean, it would be a premier feature. It would be interesting to see Google to attempt to try to do that and be able to do it with a straight face, right? Specs, go ahead.
I don't know if I would personally really want anything from Linux to be on Android. I just think that even though Android is based off Linux, I would consider them to be two entirely different operating systems, each designed for their own specific purpose. I think Android as is right now is fine, especially with all the security features and whatnot. Regarding the privacy front, the I do think that should definitely be improved. Uh, but that can be mitigated by flashing a custom ROM like Graphene OS.
Yeah, I think I was just had a thought. Like, wouldn't it be cool if you could have Google Play services in a container that you could just turn off? You know what I mean? Like, oh, I need to do this thing that requires
Yeah,
system play services.
actually, you already have something like that on Graphene. You can just set up a separate profile on Graphene specifically for Google Play Services, and then Google Play Services can run as a normal user, not a system user, and then you can use applications that require Google Play Services.
Cool. War Thunder, go ahead.
I don't know if it's necessarily for the better, but something that annoys the crap out of me, especially when you deal with a lot of these OEM phones like Samsung. I'm gonna trash on them for it. And in Linux, you can remove anything you want. I mean, yes, there are protected packages now. That is a good thing to have some protected packages where you got to do extra steps to rip them out. But having the ability to remove anything I want for better or for worse would be nice, because, and I bring this up because Samsung devices like these are notorious for bloatware, having tons of Samsung apps and Google apps pre-installed. Well, what if I don't want those? Well, right now I have no choice. I can't remove them. I can disable them, but are they really disabled? I mean, it's probably just a visual thing. So like being able to remove built-in apps and whatnot. And I understand, like, you can always factory reset your phone and reset it back and have all that reinstalled. But if I want to remove the freaking file browser that comes with my phone, let me do it. I mean, sure, plaster me with a warning saying, hey, this is a core system app. You could break your phone. Yeah, sure. Thanks, man. I'm going to rip it out anyway. I would appreciate stuff like that. Because like in the example of my personal phone, I have tons of Samsung pre-installed apps I am never using. I use one. I use the Samsung Files app because it can mount my NAS easier than anything Google has in the Play Store. Just as a simple tap and go. Other than that, I'd remove everything else that Samsung pre-installs.
Like the second browser that I
the Silk browser.
Yeah, nobody uses your Samsung. Nobody uses your browser. Sincerely, everyone. Please stop including it on my phone and not allowing me to do anything but disable it. You know what I mean?
Oh, fun fact: my mother actually does, because she just uses whatever was pre-installed. You're limited to 56 tabs in that browser, by the way.
Okay. I mean,
because she didn't understand how to close them because it's not inherently obvious. So she kept wondering why her browser would crash or it wouldn't be able to open a new tab. She thought it was broken and was getting ready to throw the tablet away. And we looked at it, and it's because she had 56 tabs open on the tablet.
It's like,
That's how bad it is.
okay. Before you go, Nerdgasm, just on that same thought, because we're talking about Samsung, I would desperately love, because my first experiences on this, I haven't had a Samsung device in probably, I don't know, since like the Galaxy Slide. You remember it like slid open, had a keyboard on the side. It was back when Sprint was still a thing. And so I haven't had one, but one of my first experiences when I got this thing was an advertisement in my notification bar for something. And the stupid thing is, you can't get rid of those. Like, even actually, there's one like right in my notification center right now asking me to go buy a Galaxy Fold. First off, I ain't got that kind of money. But second of all, I just bought this damn thing. I don't need a new phone. So at least if you're gonna send me advertisements, send me ones that are reasonable. And
or like the Photos app that brings up random photos that you have on your device and says, "Oh, 1 year ago you were doing this." I don't care.
I also don't remember that person. Like, you're showing me a picture of them, I don't know who that is, because it's just a random screenshot that most of my pictures are screenshots, you know.
A lot of mine are because like my Nextcloud has indexed a lot of those files, and so the dates on some of those files are wrong because they've moved from phone to phone to phone, and sometimes your metadata gets messed up. So like it has like, oh, in like 2007, here's this random photo that was from like the 90s or whatnot, that was like from my parents or whatnot. I'm like, that didn't happen in the 90s, dude. Like, not even close. I wasn't there.
Before you go, Nerdgasm, Yates Network's in the chat. Thank you so much for the membership. I appreciate that. Nerdgasm, go ahead.
Okay, so with also I'll address Samsung real quick. Samsung specifically does a few extra shady things with a lot of their devices, such as like hardware fuses that during certain updates burn out, that keep you from rolling back to certain versions or from using certain features. And in some cases, it could be argued that they're trying to slow down phones through some of that stuff and or force obsolescence type stuff. But I won't quite go there. But it kind of goes towards control. And it's like, you do have a lot of control with Android, being that there is the AOSP and stuff like that. But like, I think where the control really comes in is on the device itself. So like on your Linux distro, on your computer, you can use it itself to go and change itself to do the things. That's kind of where you're falling short on Android. Is like, yeah, you want to do some of these special things, you can, but you're going to have to use another device to go mess with this ROM or whatever, then apply it onto there. When it comes to privacy, like Android is decently private. It's not that it has all these privacy holes in it. It's that the phones that ship with Google Play Store and Google Play Services and all these other things, they're giving Google and some of these other actors access to the things. So it's them that's making Android less private. But Android itself, it has the privacy built in for the most part. So yeah, I think a lot of it is going to come down to control. A lot of us just want to be able to actually control the device in full to whatever we want on the device itself without having to use another device to do it. Then also, for me, I would say a big part of my reason to want a Linux phone is the apps, is the workflows. I would like to be able to use the same exact app that I'm using from one place to another, have the exact same workflow. If I was to Bluetooth keyboard or something like that, I'd like to have the same keyboard shortcuts to do things. That's really what's going to get me, because I'm in the middle of really trying to, over the next couple of years, optimize my workflows, and part of that is trying to learn certain keyboard shortcuts and learn optimized ways of doing things. And so if I could actually have those same types of workflows across all my devices, that would make that so much easier and make my life so much more efficient. Like, I know I'm not gonna get Crusader on my phone for a long time, but dang it, like, I'd like Crusader. at least Krita is on Android, but that's, you know, I'm not an artist, so yeah.
Specs, go ahead.
Another thing I'd say is the entire application space on desktop. If you were to use Linux on your phone, I don't know who in their right minds would use something like GIMP. GIMP is not at all optimized for mobile. So I think apps themselves would also have to figure out a way, the developers of those apps, to optimize their applications for mobile.
And really, the only apps that are doing that are desktop specific apps. So like GNOME's doing it for their apps and stuff like that, right? But um, very few other, like, for example, if you download this Android phone that I was showing off earlier, you can get Bitwarden from F-Droid, but the Bitwarden that comes from F-Droid doesn't work very well, even though it's designed for mobile. But the problem is it's designed for mobile on Android and not on Linux, and it's really, you can really tell the difference. It's kind of janky. And Proton does not have a Proton Pass that's not developed for. So like Proton Pass itself is available for Android, but it's not in it's not in F-Droid. So the Proton Pass that's available for that Linux device is a Linux desktop application, and they haven't designed it to work well on Linux mobile. So it looks full screen. It's horrendous to use. Like you really can't use it. So, you know, it's gonna be the same thing Microsoft faced back with Linux Mobile, trying to get developers to actually do this thing when you can't even get developers to agree to a toolkit for design, you know, let alone getting them to agree on, you know, how a mobile application is supposed to work and tie into all the things that it, you know, would have to tie into. And one of you guys mentioned control earlier on this thing, and one of the reasons why I think Linux mobile will be so hard to do is because, yeah, you're giving everybody this control, but like I talked about earlier, your phone has got to be available for 911. I'm pretty sure there's a law somewhere that says it has to, even if it doesn't have service, you still have to have access to emergency services. And if you're on let's face it, we're all Linux nerds, you know, we're all gonna get in there and do stuff. Don't do it. It's not good. You know, we're all gonna get in there and we're gonna tinker, and we're gonna break things, and we're gonna distro hop, and you know, there are going to be times where that phone's just not going to be working the way that it's supposed to be working. You know, maybe the phone call will work, but the Linux audio driver will just pop out because Paul Pipewire decided to. I mean, do you really want Pipewire in the middle of you and 911? Does that sound like a fantastic idea to anybody? I mean, it doesn't sound feasible for me, and I think that's my biggest problem with Linux Mobile is it just doesn't. The freedom that Linux enables is anathema to the tied down systems that a phone almost certainly has to be. That's the reason why if you have a Linux mobile phone, and it's fine, you know, it will work for you, but it's never going to be as fully secure and as functional and as safe to use as, you know, Android or iOS. War Thunder, go ahead, you're next.
Yeah, I was going to say you hit most of what I was going to say on the head, and I guess I will add on to it a bit. You know, even if we have the hardware, even if we have some of the software to make it all work for your banking apps, your two-factor apps, and all that, any one of us could sit down here and look at Google and look at what they have to go through to bring Android to market and to make it successful and whatnot. You're not just fighting the software devs. You're not just fighting the hardware and whatnot. You also have to be able to sell these things to people and be able to support it. And even if it is customizable, like Matt said, Pipewire will work flawlessly until you need it to work, and then it will try to figure out how to off itself and crash the system. And then now you're trying to call 911 and you have no audio server to do so and stuff like that. So it's a huge mountain to climb, I think, to put Linux in the mobile space effectively, I think. And I don't know, it's kind of like I said, like a chicken and the egg problem. I don't know what the right answer is, but there's definitely a lot of different ways to go about it.
Orgasm?
Lost my mouse for a second. Yeah, so I definitely think that realistically, yeah, we're not going to get all these apps that we'd like moved over. And it is, if something is going to take off and be successful, it is probably going to be a decent chunk different than most of the desktop Linux distros that we know. It is probably going to be something that is a bit closer in style to use and manage, such as Android. We can hope there will be a bit more control. We can hope there will be a bit more this or that, but there is a decent reason why mobile operating systems have developed the way they are, minus all the corporatocracy stuff. But for a lot of things, such as banking apps and stuff, like let's be realistic, it's just going to be using the websites. And for a lot of stuff, that's still actually going to work decently fine. Using the mobile site for a lot of the banks is not insanely different than using the app in a lot of cases these days. It's even though we've kind of moved away from web apps being the thing that, like, oh yeah, you pin the web app and it's just like an actual app on your device. Like, we've kind of moved away from that as a whole. It kind of seems like now is one of the best times ever to actually try to do that sort of thing. But I don't know, yeah, it's going to be an uphill battle, and realistically, it's going to be a niche struggle.
Bex?
Yeah, about control, there was this article by Android Authority where Epic won a lawsuit against Google, and Google now has to open up the Android a bit more in the Google Play Store. So in one of their arguments were like, oh yeah, we shouldn't let the user have so much control. You know, this is like a security compromise and blah blah blah. We shouldn't allow other app stores like F-Droid. Most of that is nonsense, but that exactly proves Nergasm's point regarding control.
So I think that for me, just the kind of the bottom line is that there's too many problems. Like like there's just so much that goes into making this good, from the control aspect, applications, hardware support, all of it, and it's a problem that requires an obscene amount of resources to solve, and willpower to want to solve it. And the likes of like Ubuntu Mobile, Manjaro Mobile, those guys ain't gonna do it. You know, like it doesn't matter what deals they make. They're not big enough. They don't have enough money to do it. Even if all the problems we've talked about today are solvable, and maybe they are, it's going to take the likes of a gigantic corporation with billions of dollars to do it. And in order for that to happen, they're going to have to see a way to get that money back. And I don't, something would have to happen to the point where, you know, Android or iOS were seen in a more negative light, and, you know, more competition be a good thing. Because right now everybody's seems to be happy with, you know, other than Linux nerds, seem to be pretty happy with the way that things are. Like, if you don't like Android, you can go use iOS. If you don't like iOS, you have a plethora of Android phones to go choose from, and, you know, from a wide range of budgeting options. Nobody's really clamoring for a third option at the moment. Maybe as the world becomes more authoritarian, something more free, you know, focused will be something that more people will look towards. Unfortunately, we seem like we're gonna get to the authoritarianism part before we get to the you know, the freedom phone, if you will. So sorry, I got a little political there, but anyway, so I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up here for today, guys. I know it's a little bit, it's not even a little early, about 20 minutes early, but My dog is clamoring to get out of this room. So, and if I let her out, she's gonna go barky, bark, bark, bark. So, I'm gonna end up having to stop here. But anyways, fantastic conversation. I was a little worried when it was just Drew and I to begin with. I'm pretty sure he pinged like several people, say, "Hey, join us so we can save the lug." You know. So I appreciate everybody showing up. I know that the Thursday ones are a little bit harder to show up for because of them being in the middle of the freaking work week. There's a possibility that this early one is going to have to get moved around because of my work schedule itself. So pay attention if you're on the Discord for me to discuss potentially moving this early one to a different day and a different time slot. So that will be in the future. But anyways, thanks everybody who watched this live for joining us. We really do appreciate you joining us. I know you guys had a fantastic time in the chat talking about all this stuff. So thank you so very much. If you too want to watch us live, we do 2 Linux user groups every single month. There's the early one, which I said the time is going to be a little bit fluid, but normally it's the second Thursday of the month at 11:15 a.m. Eastern time. We also do a second one, which is the late version. That's the 4th Thursday of the month at 8:15 p.m. Eastern time. If you want to join, it's free for everyone to join. You don't have to have anything special. You don't even have to talk if you don't want to. You can just join on and listen along, or you can watch the live stream, because I always live stream it on the channel as well. So if you want to find out and get notified about all this stuff, you can subscribe to the channel, obviously, and hit the notification bell. I can #YouTuber, or you can follow me on Mastodon or join the Discord server. All that stuff is usually put out there before the LUG happens. So thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.